Good morning. Today's presentation, Tier 2, Delivering Intensified Instruction in Reading, is in response to teachers wanting a research-based scripted program for their Tier 2 instruction. And we know that intensified instruction is a foundation for delivering any kind of lesson and any kind of program. Intensified instruction actually happens both in small group instruction in Tier 1 and in Tier 2 interventions, which we will specifically address today. So we're going to begin this morning by giving teachers a chance to get on the same page with colleagues. We want you to consider at your table group and then share out, first of all, in your mind, what is the purpose or the why of Tier 2 instruction? Second, what are the characteristics of Tier 2 instruction that distinguish it from Tier 1? In other words, how does Tier 2 become more intense for learners? Rockland Unified's why is best reflected by Dr. Sharon Vaughn at the National Center on Intensive Intervention. She states, by providing intensive interventions and by organizing our schools to address them, we are really embracing every student who comes to our schools and saying no matter what their instructional needs are, we're going to specify, articulate, and implement an appropriate intervention for that child. But even in high-quality intervention studies that demonstrated statistically significant effects for specific intervention programs when used with students who had the most intensive needs in reading, off-the-shelf programs are unlikely to work for students with intensive needs without specialized instruction that is explicit, systematic, and targets frequent opportunities for response and feedback. So our session outcomes today are going to be how we can intensify support explicitly, systematically, and with frequent opportunities for student response and feedback. We are not here to do Education 101 because many teachers have this in their teaching repertoire. However, we do want to get on the same page about how to intensify small group instruction to make sure that students are progressing. Tier 2 is not always about a commercial program, but a time to provide targeted instruction where students need more time or have gaps. Done well, research shows intensified instruction does improve student learning. So we will look at what does this look like in action. We will also have some collaborative time to practice by intensifying benchmark and springboard materials. Part 1, Understanding Explicit Instruction. Explicit instruction may be familiar to teachers with experience in explicit direction instruction or EDI. It's often used for teacher-led instruction of new skills, teaching students to apply generalized knowledge or skills to novel settings, or even addressing learning needs, including strategies to support cognitive processing. Here our definition is that it is the overt teaching of the steps or processes needed to understand a construct, apply a strategy, or complete a task. In other words, it's careful, direct, and intentional. It is precise and accurate. Explicit instruction includes teacher or paraprofessional presentation of new material. It might include adult modeling of cognitive processes or their thinking or think-alouds, or succinct demonstration of what is expected at each step so that students can accomplish learning a task. So let's jump into making a lesson more explicit. The RTI network discusses 4 components of how to make this happen in the classroom. The first is stating the purpose and learning goal of the lesson to make the learning target clear. We know from research that students achieve more when they know the learning target. And as a reminder, these types of small group instructional lessons begin with, by the end, you will be able to fill in the blank. RTI Network also talks about providing models that are clear and detailed. We need to, however, develop very simple, specific language for the parts of the lessons that involve an explanation or explaining a very important idea. It is important to also use correct vocabulary for the discipline as appropriate and to be consistent throughout the directions. It's also important to use pictures, graphics, manipulatives, or think-alouds to support cognitive processes. Remember, modeling how you approach a task or solve a problem by talking out loud is helpful for students as they organize their own thinking. This might include reflecting on the text, implementing strategies for answering text-based questions, and even giving yourself feedback in front of students. Finally, there is an opportunity to provide guided practice using the I do, we do, you do approach, and gradually releasing responsibility to students. It is also important to, of course, provide specific feedback about aspects of the task throughout this approach. So let's talk about precise, simple, or replicable language. When giving directions or explaining an idea, we need to use language that repeats, use similar terms, and age-appropriate detail. If you look at the example on the left, you see a long and very circuitous example of how to read C words. On the other hand, on the other side of the screen, you see a very long direction that is given to students that will be difficult for many to remember. So looking at the rule on the left side of the screen or the directions on the right side of the screen, take a moment with a partner and try to repeat these directions or this rule in a very succinct, clear manner for students. So we're going to provide some time right now for teachers to go deeper into the characteristics of explicit instruction. So for the next few minutes, you have three choices. Again, I'm going to point out that we're trying to UDLize our presentation with choice. You can read and consider questions from a digital version of Designing and Delivering Intensive Instruction. You can use a printed version and perhaps with a partner read aloud and work through those questions, or you can listen to a screencast version of this information. Part 2, Understanding Systematic Instruction. Systematic instruction is really breaking down complex skills into smaller, manageable chunks of learning and requires careful consideration about how to best teach discrete pieces to achieve the overall learning targets. Systematic instruction includes how we sequence learning chunks from easiest to most difficult, or how we provide tools or structures within each chunk to control the difficulty throughout learning. So let's look deeper at how to make a lesson more systematic. And again, there are 4 areas that we can look at from the RTI network. The first is, of course, introducing skills in isolation and then integrating them with other skills. Think about how we do word parts to words or words to sentences, or even in mathematics, numbers to different kinds of computations. We always introduce skills in isolation and then integrate them with the other skills. This allows students to build upon their prior knowledge. Teachers know that introducing skills in isolation and then integrating them with other skills is the best way for students who are struggling to learn. It helps them to build upon their prior knowledge. And of course, this is based on assessments we know about student learning. Teachers are excellent at breaking tasks into chunks and including amounts of text when they are learning to read. Remember, scaffolding does not mean doing the task for students, but helping them to take those bite-sized chunks out of the task or bite-sized chunks out of the complexity of text. Teaching strategies for remembering or organizing information is key in making a lesson more systematic. Remember, modeling, including think-aloud rehearsals of what students need to remember in tasks, using graphic organizers, or focusing on keywords or structures of text so that students can enter the text more successfully. It also could be presenting information in more than one modality. Finally, it's important to continue to teach routines for important procedures, and that includes using consistent cues for students, even finger placing or saying the words out loud and pausing at periods, or how we blend words when reading text. So now again, we're going to take some time to look at systematic instruction in a much deeper way and several strategies that are here on the slide. These are excellent resources, and I would encourage teachers at some point, they may want to look at all of them. But you have a choice. Reading a section from Reading Rockets, which is really great about helping students break down text. Watching the GIST strategy, another excellent way for students to break down complex text. Looking at teaching vocabulary systematically, and even though this is designed for English learners, it absolutely could be applied to Tier 2 instruction, or listening to a screencastified example of how this would look in a typical reading assignment. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm. Do you want to just go to the next one?
Part 3, Understanding Student Response and Feedback. The RTI network talks about using more opportunities for response, for practice and feedback in small group instruction. Students with learning difficulties need frequent opportunities to respond and practice with teacher feedback throughout lessons. And so we want to use small group instruction to provide as many opportunities for response and feedback as possible. It also is important to be monitoring student understanding, and this helps students refine and master new skills. Remember, we want to get away from round-robin types of instruction where students are sitting and watching or waiting for other students to respond, and we want to keep our instruction brisk and give lots of opportunities for student response and participation. This allows them to practice. So let's talk more in depth about how this instruction looks different from Tier 1 instruction. Well-designed intervention time, almost think of it as double dipping, allows for more instruction, provides more practice, and ensures students are engaged in learning time. So just by reducing the group size, we automatically can increase students' learning opportunities. Smaller groups, of course, allow for more practice, feedback, and closer monitoring of student progress. We want to ensure active student participation, and so strategies like using choral response, partner reading and response, and multiple ways to practice, whether it's whiteboards or manipulative work, are important in this kind of setting. Using signals as part of routines, providing cues to evoke unison oral responses, for example, get ready and then respond, allow students to actively participate. We need to remember to promote active student engagement with brisk teacher pacing. This doesn't mean going so fast that students don't understand, but we also want to make sure that students are briskly going through the materials, having multiple times that they can call out and respond. Providing corrective feedback is essential in small group instruction. We need to keep feedback specific to tasks or processes and give feedback that helps students link their behavior to the outcomes of the learning tasks. We want to model the task or correct response, provide immediate feedback for discrete tasks, or feedback after a short delay for complex tasks. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Finally, we want to provide additional time to practice tasks that are completed incorrectly. So here's one more opportunity to go deeper and think about what this looks like in instruction. Again, you have some choices. In the first, there are a couple of different video clips that are really more from direct instruction, small group reading lessons, and you can get a chance to see how teachers use signals and pacing and choral responses in their reading time and actually using whiteboards in math time. Or you can, with a partner, use a handout that is provided by the TOSAs and then look at an Anita Archer lesson and how she teaches students to respond and practice choral responses and how she uses cues to make sure that there is optimal participation in a lesson. Or you can look at a screencast of how to use error correction and feedback with students in reading instruction. So with the time remaining, we invite you to work with colleagues and now apply one or more of the 3 ways to intensify a lesson. You will be able to modify or adapt springboard or benchmark materials that are provided by your facilitators. So here's some takeaway reflection questions as you go into the next week. How does thinking about these 3 approaches help you with planning small group instruction, especially in your next intervention sessions? What are your next steps, both personally and collectively with your grade level colleagues? We hope that you will continue to research the ways to intensify instruction, and the RTI website and a little summary of these 3 approaches is provided for you.